Hi there, this is District of Cinema with Benjamin Price, and today I'm talking to director Corey Sherman. His film Big Boys, which is nominated for the John Cassavetes Award at this year's Independent Spirit Awards. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Excited to be talking with you.
So first and foremost, I sort of wanted to talk about your background a little bit and sort of specifically how starting off in comedic sketches and then your work on Adult Swim sort of helped you hone the comedic rhythms of this movie and also kind of helped you refine the more like cringe-inducing elements at play.
Yeah, I mean, I always was mainly interested in doing comedy growing up. I just made lots of sketches with my friends, and then in college, I started doing it with like all my like collaborators in film school and everything. And I think I was just naturally just like drawn to making people laugh and wanting to make things that were pretty light. And I think the main thing that I like took away from all that work is just like making something that's like identifiable for people, like trying to hone in on like, oh, this is like a specific experience that I know I've had that I have a feeling other people have had. So I'm going to make a like a video or a sketch about it and hopefully like capture that thing so that anybody else who's watching is like, oh my God, I know exactly what he's talking about. And like, because I just love that feeling as a viewer of like a movie or a sketch or something like just honing in on some life experience I've never seen represented on screen before. And a lot of what motivated me to make Big Boys was a feeling of like, oh, I want to make like a gay coming of age story that feels as true to life as possible, that is filled with as many sort of like little details of that experience as possible, so that anybody who's gone through that um, will just feel like seen by the movie and feel like they are seeing their own life like reflected back at them. And and I think that I also, like I want that to be funny and I want that to be like fun for an audience. And it's like a difficult time in life, but I wanted to make it like approachable for people. And so I think that, yeah, all the time that I spent like honing my comedic skills and my time spent working with like comedic actors and all of that helped towards that effort.
I really felt seen personally by the sketch you made about the hot take about Lady Bird. That was really well done. Um,
Thanks.
so speaking about making those connections earlier on, this film is very USC heavy. Like a lot of the people you're working with went to your
Yeah.
alma mater. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, sort of, what the experience was like knowing everyone you were working with behind the camera and how that sort of helped you adjust to the reality of working with this cast that was all new to you in terms of working with them.
Yeah. I mean, some people I actually knew when I was at USC with them, and other people were just people that were, peers of mine who I had never worked with or even met. And I just connected with them when I was gearing up to make this movie because they were the friends of my friends, and I'm just very glad to have met them because like they just really understood the material for this movie and offered so much of their own experiences and stories and ideas towards just enriching this story and making it as realistic and true to life as possible. And then in terms of like working with like a whole new cast of people, I mean that was so exciting to me because some of them like Taj Cross and Marion Van Kuyk I had been and Emily Deschanel like I had been fans of from previous work that they had done on like Bones and like Pen 15. And so that was like one level of like, oh, I'm just a fan of these actors and I can't wait to work with them. And then with actors I had never seen in anything before, but had just submitted tapes like Isaac Krasner and David Johnson, Dora Madison, like they were all like so like just from their tapes alone, I was like, oh my God, they know these characters so well. They're so funny. They're performing in such a sort of like loose, like lived in, like realistic style. And so it was like a very exciting like idea of like taking these people that felt so fresh to me and then I guess merging them in with actors that I had already been a fan of to create this new story together.
And we will come back to Isaac. He's so wonderful on this movie. You edited the film as well, with someone who went to USC, but I'm curious about sort of, do you direct more with an editor's mindset, or do you think you edit more with a director's mindset? Which would you say is more true for you?
Yeah, well, I co-edited the film with Eric Vogt Nilsson, who's a good friend of mine and a terrific editor who I owe a lot to. I think he took this movie to places that I would not have been able to take it to if I was the sole editor on it. I love editing. It's one of my favorite parts, if not my favorite part of the filmmaking process. And I think that honestly, I was trying not to think too much as an editor while I was on set because I was trying to just focus on capturing the moment that was in front of us and like get the best performances as possible and just like communicate the story. Um, and once we got to post, it definitely, um, yeah, I mean, it was nice to be able to switch. I don't know if I was directing it like from an editor's mindset or vice versa, as much as it was just like a really nice experience to then go into the editing room and feel like we just had this like wealth of material and now we could craft the story from there. And I honestly, I think I was a bit too hard on myself at the beginning because I was like slashing scenes left and right. I was like, this isn't fast enough. I messed this up. And it took working with another editor, with Eric, for him to be like, actually, no, like, you think that this part doesn't work, but give me a shot at it. And then he would edit a scene. I'd be like, oh, you're totally right. Like, let's put that back in. Um, and yeah, it was just a really good back and forth of like, what is essential for this story. There were things that I loved as a director because I could remember how funny it was on set and how much it felt like, oh, obviously this is going to be in the movie. And then when it was like, oh, we're in using our editing brains now, it's like, no, like even though this is funny, it's a weird detour or it's too slow, so we have to lose it.
Well, and so you've mentioned that sort of everything from you mentioned Penguin 5 earlier, but also Bo Burnham's Eighth Grade, and then Celine Sciamma's Tomboy influenced your film. I'm curious if you see a difference between American cinematic coming of age stories and international features that are kind of traversing the same arc, and what differences do you see between those?
Totally. I mean, that's a really good question. Um, I mean, I do think that like a lot of American ones, I don't count eighth grade among this, but like a lot of American ones are very eager to tie things up pretty neatly in a bow and present things in a very sort of like clean, smoothed over way for audiences to digest of like, yeah, like adolescence is hard, but everything's all right in the end, and like he gets the girl or it's like stuff like that. And I think that I mean I've always loved international movies and like I think that they're more willing to sit in awkwardness. I think they're more willing to like keep things a bit more open-ended, sometimes be rougher around the edges, be like slower, which sometimes I think can make for a less pleasant viewing experience and make something more unapproachable. And sometimes I really like how American movies are like can take an approach of like wanting things to be like fun and lively. So honestly, I think I was trying to like combine my favorite things from both styles.
I've definitely there's some DNA of eighth grade here, like sinking into
Yeah,
the back of your chair. Yeah, no, it's
completely.
powerful stuff. So Isaac Krasner's breakthrough performance has also been recognized by the Independent Spirits. He's, like I said, he's wonderful in this movie, and I feel like so much hinges on these up close and personal moments you have with that character and with that performance. How did you find the balance between sort of giving him the space to find those moments, and then, I mean, quite literally directing and molding that as you were making it?
Yeah, totally. I think it was really clear to me from the beginning that like Isaac just knew exactly how to play this character, that he was just like channeling from a very deep place, like this person and all his instincts about him. Like he understood him better than I did. And that was a really nice feeling because I was like, oh, well, in the same way that I can trust like my cinematographer to know a lot more about cinematography, I can trust Isaac to know a lot more about Jamie than I do. I think that I tried to keep things as open as possible through like improv and rehearsal so that Isaac would have all the room that he needed to fill in the movie with Jamie's inner life. And I ended up feeling like my job was just to provide guardrails or sort of signposts being like, this is what the audience needs to understand Jamie is going through right now. It was always like, you're always being Jamie, but
Mhm.
we're getting something like we need to get this specific thing from Jamie for this scene. So that was the sort of like guidance I tried to provide.
Well, and you said correct. He was one of the first people to audition for that part,
He was the
right?
first person. He was the first
That's
tape we
crazy.
watched. I know.
That's
I know.
crazy. So in that moment, like what's going through your head? What, if you can recall, how did you know in that moment that he was perfect for this part? And also, I mean, just how did it feel to know so early in the casting process, like this is our guy?
It was such a thrill, and it was trippy too, because like he was reading lines that I had had in my head for such a long time, playing a character I had wanted to put on screen for such a long time, and it was like all of a sudden it was like, oh wow, there's like not only is he perfect for the role, but there's just a real kid who's I'm seeing read these lines for the first time. Um, and there were it was just like it was I remember that night very clearly because it was such an energizing feeling of like, oh my God, like I think with him this can actually be the movie that we're dreaming it can be. And yeah, I mean he fully delivered on that promise.
I really loved the score in this movie by Will Weisenfeld. Can you
Reason.
talk a little Wiesenfeld, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about why you favored, I feel like a more like ethereal sound versus when you go into this kind of movie, you expect like pop song here, pop song there. Like what sort of informs that choice on your end?
Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of Will's music. He makes music under the name Baths and also Geotic. And I've been a fan of his music for like 10 years. And yeah, I was listening to it one day and it just felt very clear to me. I was like, oh, well, like this, if there was anybody who could do this movie, it would be him. And I feel very fortunate that he was down to do it. And I think that there's a quality in his music that's very almost like fantastical. Like it's sort of like, he captures the feeling of like being swept off your feet and sort of like floating through air and a sort of like giddiness and a like a this joyfulness that I thought would just speak to Jamie's inner life really well, especially when I wanted the movie itself to feel really like grounded um and like tangible. I wanted his inner life to feel like something that was like taking flight. And so yeah, I mean this sort of ethereal choral like vocals like it ended up just I thought fitting perfectly.
Yeah, it's so unexpected in the moment, but it really does suit where we are and where we're going. Speaking from my own experience, there's a cosmic attachment between the teenager and their room. And
Yeah.
it's so telling that the first time we see Jamie, that's the first thing we see. And I'm curious, what did you want to tell us about Jamie from his room in that opening scene? And how did you work with your production designer to express that?
That's such a good question. I've never been asked that before. Yeah, I worked with a great production designer, Rachel Scott, on this movie, and I think there were like two. I think we were trying to capture sort of like a transition point in his room where you see a lot of stuff that's left over from his childhood, and that was very
Mm,
much inspired by eighth grade too. It's like when you see like a kid's room, it's not just exactly the stuff they're into in that moment. It's like a combination of things from like the when they were 6 and when they're
right.
10, and like, and so I wanted some of the stuff to be left over from like when it was just like generic boys decor. So there's like a strip of like sports, different like athletes on his wall, like of when his mom I thought like, oh, he might be into sports. And but then some of that stuff is like pasted over with what he's actually interested in, which is like Anthony Bourdain and like Jonathan Gold and just like food and restaurant stuff. And so, yeah, I definitely wanted to show that sort of crossroads of like what's expected of him being sort of left behind and what he's really interested in sort of taking over.
And the Bourdain was really fun because I feel like that didn't really click for me until after he brings out the like paprika for the burgers. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Um, the John Cassavetes Award specifically, obviously, it rewards movies operating within budgets under $1 million. As an indie, I'm curious how vital platforms like big fan of Letterboxd, Instagram, how vital social media is in getting the word out about your movie.
It's huge. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I think Letterboxd is such a useful way of just like spreading the word and like it's like word of mouth, just like, oh, you saw your friend watch this, then you check it out. I've discovered so many movies that way. Um, yeah, and particularly like a more like indie movie like ours, which is smaller, like I think that social media is just so crucial as a way for people to discover it because we just don't have advertising and marketing power that other bigger films do. So it's sort of like we really rely on people being like, you should check out this movie I just saw.
You've been showing this movie at more 60 plus film festivals all around the world, almost 2 years now, correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
Wow. Is there a moment that really came to life in a way you didn't expect before you started showing it to audiences?
Yeah. There's a scene in the movie where the characters are playing taboo with each other, and then Jamie gets up and starts dancing. And like that was a moment on set where because we had like two cameras rolling, it was the only time we did that. And we had the actors like entirely improvising, playing games with each other, and Jamie improvising his dancing, and Gus Bendinelli, our cinematographer, improvising the camera movement as he followed Isaac while Isaac was dancing. That just was like a moment where like the movie so just like came to life before our eyes and just felt so just like joyful and lively and spontaneous in a way that I dreamed about this movie feeling. And so that was like such a rush. And then there were also moments in the editing room where we figured something else out, like something new entirely, where we sort of like repurposed a scene. And I remember another feeling of like, oh, this is very like the movie's still alive. It's still changing before our eyes. And like it's becoming what it needs to become. And, I just, those are like the best moments.
Now that you're sort of nearing the end of your journey with this film, I'm curious if you could go back to the summer of 2022, what's one thing you'd say about making a debut feature that you wish you could have known at the start of this process?
Honestly, it would just be to I- it's it would just be to like enjoy these like the moments of making the movie as much as possible because that is the stuff that keeps me coming back that is like so deeply fulfilling and like in the moment it can feel really stressful because there's so many logistics to figure out and there's so much that's like unclear about the future of the movie and I think just being as present as possible and I think it makes for a better movie and also just like makes for a more enjoyable experience. And I feel lucky that like I was present for a lot of it, but I can also remember like unnecessary stress where I'm like, you know what, like next time I really want to remind myself that like all I can really control is just like what's happening today and just try to make the best movie with people I'm with as possible.
Well, this time you killed it. Thank you so much for talking with me today. Big Boys is streaming on wherever you get your movies, your iTunes, your Amazons. Am I missing anything? Other
Yeah, like
platforms?
Google Play, Fandango, YouTube. Yeah, if you just Google Big Boys movie, you'll find it.
Awesome. And this is Benjamin Price reporting for District of Cinema, signing off. See you next time. Bye.